This month on 219 West, New York business, from Wall Street to Christopher Street, how the stock market affects you. It's not just your stock portfolio at risk.
There's a crunch here, but we're not talking about buildings or materials, we're talking about people's lives.
Bewitching Grooms, a fictional sports craze, comes to life in New York.
But next thing it'll be professional athletes, and next thing you know, you'll be going to see your Quidditch match instead of your American football match. Mark my words.
How sweet it is. New York City goes ape over gingerbread. Hello and welcome to this month's edition of 219 West, the monthly news magazine produced by students of the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism for CUNY TV. I'm Dana Rappaport.
And I'm Erica Butler. We'll have those stories coming up, plus disappearing languages, how a Long Island tribe is reclaiming its forgotten language. And later on, I'll be making merry with holiday desserts. But first, the Wall Street dollar. For many people, the stock market means investments and their portfolios. But Wall Street's reach goes far beyond bankers, bonds, bulls, and bears. David Montalvo introduces us to a West Village woman whose health and welfare depend on Wall Street's bottom line.
To many people, this is the familiar background music of Wall Street. And this is its familiar sound. About the same time the opening bell rings on Wall Street, Valita Henry gets ready for her investment, not in stocks, but in all her medications.
Morning. I take these pills every single morning.
Valita is 64 years old. She's HIV positive and, like thousands of New Yorkers, what happens on Wall Street affects her life directly.
So because we're the lowest people on the totem pole, that means that trickle-down kind of stuff doesn't affect us.
At first glance, she might appear completely disconnected from the city's high finance industry, but the two are actually closer than it seems.
I set out to get HIV/AIDS because I wanted to die. I was raised in a home with people who were wolves. It sounds comical, but it wasn't then at the time.
Valita lives in affordable housing in a building for people living with AIDS. It's a small studio on Christopher Street in the West Village. She recalls how her mother left her as a child and how she was raised by a father who abused her.
And I remember my father, whom I loved dearly and still do. He's passed on now, would always say to me, I'm doing this to you because I love you.
The courts took Valita away from her father when she was around 9 years old. She was first sent to a psychiatric treatment center for girls called Callagee Hall. Then she was sent to Bellevue Hospital's psychiatric facilities before ending up at a children's residential center called St. Agatha.
You make friends with someone says they care about you, they love you, and then they leave you. But each time they leave you, they always leave you worse than when they met you.
Valita was using drugs and was homeless when she became suicidal and contracted HIV. That was 10 years ago. She said that with the help of certain city programs, she was able to pull herself out of her death trap. Now some of those programs are at risk. The slowly recovering economy is putting them on the chopping block, and that has some advocates concerned.
The consequence is going to be that people fall out of medical care.
Barry's organization teaches low-income New Yorkers living with HIV/AIDS, like residents at the Bailey House behind me, to understand how the city's budget affects their lives. But what it doesn't teach is that what happens on Wall Street doesn't just stay on Wall Street.
It works like this. Every year, the city collects about $60 billion in revenue. It has to collect this because that's close to the amount it spends, and because it's required by law. The city must have a balanced budget. To raise these billions of dollars, the city uses taxes, sells municipal bonds, and it asks the state and federal government for some money. But the biggest pot of gold is found on Wall Street. Investment firms, hedge funds, and the rest of the financial industry are here. The billionaires who run Wall Street are here, and a lot of the millionaires who make tons of money from it are here. This made personal income tax one of the city's biggest sources of revenue. In fact, the richest 1% of all New Yorkers make up about 30 to 40% of this. The city also collects banking taxes and other general corporation taxes from the financial industry. This adds up to a larger and larger slice of the $60 billion budget pie. Now, factor in the financial crisis and new regulation on Wall Street, and it makes for a city with new money problems. Brad Lander used to work in community development in low-income neighborhoods. Today, he represents Brooklyn neighborhoods, Park Slope, Cobble Hill, and Carroll Gardens on the City Council and on the Economic Development Committee.
So you do have to ask the question, how do we have a responsible fiscal budget at the city and the state levels where we can pay for the government we want with the resources we have? Now, one has to figure out what mix of cuts and revenues get us to that goal.
And the one person currently responsible for that is someone who used to work on Wall Street. New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
When it comes to the mayor's priorities, he's very comfortable protecting his friends on Wall Street, but when it comes to poor New Yorkers, he not only has not stood up for them, but he's actually actively fought initiatives that would help make their lives better.
In wrestling with the multi-billion-dollar budget, the mayor had proposed cutting $2 million from housing programs that serve people like Valita. That is, former homeless New Yorkers with HIV/AIDS who suffer from mental health and substance abuse problems.
But I think it puts extra responsibility on a progressive legislature like the New York City Council to push and push and push and make sure that people are protected, that government provides that set of protections that we need in place.
Over the summer, City Council Speaker Christine Quinn fought the mayor to fully restore the housing program funds. His administration agreed to restore the funds, but only 75% of it.
Without the help of case management, I would be one of those individuals stuck, held hostage in this one room. I think when they think about people who need help, they think solely about somebody to sweep their floor. There are more issues to that.
And now there are issues at risk, in part because of the Wall Street dollars that have stopped pouring into the city's budget. Even New York's chief financial officer, John Liu, recently said in a budget report that he believes Wall Street will not generate the revenue for the city like it once did. Lander agrees.
I've heard a whole range of economists, including quite conservative economists. I think the most conservative economists that people sort of look to kind of say what's going to happen on Wall Street say jobs on Wall Street are going to shrink in the months and years to come. But it's a balancing act. We're going to have more cuts this year, and there's no way around it. Budget cuts affect everybody.
Wall Street types?
Wall Street types too. I mean, you need the streets to be safe, you need the subways to run. You know, the public goods, the public goods that are our safety, our streets, our public transit, the quality of our water, those affect everyone.
There just doesn't seem to be any balance in how they're dealing with us. Don't get me wrong, I understand that there's a crunch here, but we're not talking about buildings or materials, we're talking about people's lives.
For 219 West, I'm David Montalvo.
Back in October, we brought you the story of little-known languages in danger of disappearing. But with linguists estimating that one language goes extinct every 2 weeks, not all languages can be saved. The last speaker of the Native American language of Mohegan passed away in 1908. In the second part of our Vanishing Languages series, Chica Moses takes a look at how one tribe member is working to keep the Mohegan language alive.
Stephanie Fielden is speaking Mohegan to anyone who will listen.
Language is made to be spoken. It's not alive until it is spoken.
Fielden is trying to breathe life into a Native American language that hasn't been widely spoken in more than 100 years. What little Fielden has to go on comes from a very distant relative who began documenting the language in the 1800s.
Fidelia Fielding, who was the last speaker. She left behind diaries that she wrote in Mohegan. So that's like the only bit of the language that was actually written down.
Fielding, a linguist and a member of the Mohegan tribe in Connecticut, has been using Fidelia's 4 diaries to build a dictionary of Mohegan words and phrases. She started with a simple list of Mohegan words, then she found the same words in 2 other Native American dialects, Delaware and Wampanoag. Both of those languages are better documented than Mohegan, and many of those words have English translations. She wrote the Mohegan word next to its Delaware, Wampanoag, and English counterparts, studying how the word changed between languages. Slowly, her list of Mohegan words began to grow.
We had an edition of the Mohegan Dictionary in 2006. I think there were 813 words in it. Now, the 2008 edition, I think there were 950 words, and I think now there are about 1,200 and some words.
Like the native tongues of other Algonquian tribes on the East Coast, the Mohegan language began to fade in the 1800s, when men, women, and children started leaving reservations for work and school.
The people you're working for, you have to communicate with them, and they're not going to speak native language.
Strong says that in recent decades, many of the tribes have focused on celebrating their culture. That includes a renewed interest in their language.
In the 1960s, when there was a great deal more emphasis on identity, the Red Power movement following the Black Power movement began to turn young people more and more to concerns about their culture and their language and so forth.
But trying to learn Mohegan words in grammar is a tough process. Among other differences, words that are adjectives in English are verbs in Mohegan.
Explaining all this to people, you know, if they don't get it, right away, they feel lost and like they're drowning, and so they say, "I quit," and they leave.
Fielding has seen interest in her classes fluctuate.
At some point, we had almost 30 students going at the same time. So that was a real thrill to me. I mean, it was like, rejuvenation, yes, this is going to work. And then it just sort of,
She's incorporating a game to make the language more accessible.
It's called total physical response. You put a sign with an English word, and then using that same sign, you use the Mohegan. And so your head is saying, this means what? Okay, this means what. And so when I say Jaquan, I know my head and my hand tell me it means what.
And she's welcomed interest from other tribes. The Shinnecock people on Long Island have a language very similar to Mohegan. Elizabeth, Tina, and Tahanish Terrence are 3 generations of Shinnecocks who have taken Fielding's language class online. Learning the language helps the women connect to their tribe's past.
To me, it is an organization of the words that we used. I'll say that are more or less scattered. We use them in conversation, or as I say, in place names. But we did not look at it as a language.
It's also boosting the younger generation's interest in their own culture.
Coming back to the res after going to college, it really helped me focus on my identity as a Shinnecock person and the language that I need to learn. It's part of my responsibility, I feel, in this community to be a part of it and to pass it down through the generations.
Fielding is working to help make sure there is a language to pass down, but she knows just how slow the process of reviving a language can be. So like Fidelia Fielding, she's archiving everything she's done, just in case this revival fails.
Tell me the word again for I have.
Nawachanam.
Nawachanam.
If nothing happens and I die and there's no one here that wants to take over, there will be in the future. Might be 2 or 3 generations from now, but someone is going to come and go into the archives and say, look at this. And they won't have to start at the same place I did.
What? Perfect.
For 219 West, I am Chika Moses.
Coming up, Harry Potter lives on. Fans are keeping the phenomenon alive through a sometimes brutal sport.
And now, Bewitching brooms. As Hollywood prepares to say goodbye to Harry Potter after the last movie in the series, fans of the Good Wizard are keeping the culture alive. A new sport inspired by the witches and wizards of Hogwarts is sweeping through colleges and communities across the country. Vineeth Thomas has the story.
Grooms up, and we're off at another exciting game of Quidditch.
Quidditch, Harry Potter's favorite game, has left the field of fantasy and is now the most fiercely competitive fictional game in the real world.
It's wonderful. I think it's a great way for people to celebrate the sport and to celebrate the books, which are a huge part of our lives.
The sport is another sign that the Harry Potter phenomenon is finding new ways to stretch its legs and legacy. Harry Potter has conjured up a genre of music, meetup groups, charity organizations, and now the International Quidditch Association.
Someone had to come up with the idea first. If someone had wrote the idea for baseball on a book and baseball wasn't a real sport and then someone decided to play it, it's the same deal. I mean, of course we're not going to actually be able to fly.
So how do you play Quidditch with feet planted on the ground? The game is a cross between basketball, dodgeball and rugby with 7 players on each team. Except everyone holds a broom between his legs during gameplay.
I've been playing football and lacrosse my entire life, and I can honestly say that this is so much more fun than both of them.
3 chasers pass a slightly deflated volleyball called the quaffle and score by getting it through one of the 3 hoops on the other end of the field. The game ends when the snitch, a player dressed in yellow, is chased down and a sock with a tennis ball in his shorts is snagged.
Quidditch started 5 years ago on a lazy Sunday afternoon at Middlebury College.
Alex Benepi is at the forefront of the Quidditch movement.
On the first day we played, we didn't even have enough hoops. We used garbage cans.
It's come a long way since then. Quidditch's biggest event, the World Cup, with 46 teams and more than 700 athletes, landed in New York City for 2 days.
We love Harry Potter and we love Quidditch.
Thousands of enthusiasts swarmed the fields, with play going well into the night.
But next thing it'll be professional athletes, and next thing you know you'll be going to see your Quidditch match instead of your American football match. Mark my words.
A community team called the Bad Assalists represented the New York City Harry Potter meetup group, or the group that shall not be named.
1, 2, 3,
A team of athletes from NYU paid their own way because the college wouldn't.
We are unofficial because NYU won't sponsor us. They don't acknowledge Quidditch as a sport. They think it's imaginary, so they won't acknowledge it.
Quidditch has evolved into a full contact sport that looks nothing like a kid's game. At this year's Cup, there were a number of injuries and players were hauled away in ambulances. The Bad Assalists were undaunted.
I like the roughness against the other chases. The physical aspect of it's really appealing.
Everybody encouraged you and supported you. It didn't matter your level of experience, so that was kind of cool.
In the end, Middlebury College, the team that started it all, lifted the World Cup. The tournament was a huge turning point for the sport. Now players believe Quidditch has a future.
Emerson has a coach with a suit and tie. I would love to be that guy, Be like the Vince Lombardi of Quidditch, man.
Recent history shows that even as vampires rise from the dead through hits like Twilight, True Blood, and The Vampire Diaries, superheroes show up on Broadway. Old franchises can have second lives.
It started off with these books, but now it's gotten taken to a level where people coming off the streets or people watching at home can really get an appreciation for the sport and for the game, even if they have really little knowledge in the book.
An appreciation that might be giving a new lease of life to the saga of Harry Potter.
Joining us is Vineeth Thomas. Great piece, Vineeth.
Thank you, Dana.
So it looks like Quidditch is really picking up in New York.
Yes, but it's not just New York. It's Germany, it's the UK, New Zealand, Australia. They're all contacting the International Quidditch Association to find out how to play the game.
And from what we saw in your piece, it looks like the fans are taking it pretty seriously. It's not just a game.
Yeah, it's like an intensely competitive sport. People get injured all the time, and it's a little scary watching it, actually.
So do you have to be a die-hard Harry Potter fan to play it?
At the World Cup, I found that quite a few people were not even big readers of the books. They just wanted to try out a different game.
And Quidditch is not the only way Harry Potter fans are showing their love, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. There's the music inspired by Harry Potter. There are charity organizations which are promoting literacy, and there are the fans who just don't want to say goodbye. So I hope to focus on that in my next piece.
Great, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Erica?
The holidays are here in New York, and with that comes lots of delicious treats. Hot chocolate, candy canes, and Christmas cookies are popping up all over the city. Uche Abenobi takes a gingerly look at a favorite holiday snack.
Oh my, gingerbread? Gingerbread madness has hit the city. This year, La Parka Meridian will host their second annual gingerbread display to benefit City Harvest. The theme is movies made in New York City.
La Parka Meridian and our team behind Norma's, our very famous, successful restaurant here, made King Kong. The King Kong sculpture, obviously #1, is made out of gingerbread. It wouldn't be a gingerbread structure without that. And then I know, like, the backdrop of the whole cityscape is actually all edible, which I find amazing. It's made out of fondant.
The hotel, located in Midtown, reached out to a few local bakeries to participate. Treat Trucks is one of the many that answered the call. Their display took about 5 days to construct.
So I picked West Side Story. It is one of my absolute favorite musicals of all time, and I just love the idea of the gingerbread display of West Side Story. Little sharks and jets made out of gingerbread. And the big challenge is everything has to be edible. You can't even have a lollipop with a stick in it. Every single little piece has to be edible. I'm now in love with fruit roll-up because you can make little dresses out of it.
Viewing the display is free, but $1 buys you a vote for your favorite gingerbread creation and a chance to win a hotel stay. Guests are invited to feast their eyes on the hotel's cookie-ornamented Christmas tree. But please keep your fingers and mouths to yourself.
This year we really wanted to be fun and tied in with the gingerbread extravaganza. So we did cookies. So we have all different fun holiday cookies. You see we've got our little gingerbread man, Santas, different Christmas trees. Only issue is it's been up, a day or so, and we already have people trying to come over and steal some cookies. They want to just eat it right off the tree.
Oh, and what's dessert without some holiday cocktails?
So we have stuff like white hot chocolate, mocha for the kids, and then a big apple crisp, which is sort of like an apple martini with gingerbread in it for the adults.
The displays will be on view in the lobby of the hotel for an entire month. For 219 West, I'm Uche Abenobi.
Joining us here on set is Kathy Kaufman of the Institute of Culinary Education, a chef and a culinary historian. Welcome, Kathy. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for having me, Erica.
So we just saw a package about gingerbreads and gingerbread houses in the city. What is its historical significance?
Gingerbread goes back well over 1,000 years, at least in Europe. It was something that was used during the holiday season and was often given as gifts at Christmas time. Queen Elizabeth I was known for giving portraits of her favorites rendered in gingerbread to them. So it's a wonderful, wonderful treat, often given on actually New Year's Day as the day for exchanging gifts. But certainly throughout Europe. France was famous for gingerbread in the cities of Reims and Dijon. Germany, very, very famous. Nuremberg gingerbread is supposedly the finest in the world, so it's a wonderful European tradition.
And why do you think it's so popular here, now, still?
Well, first, it's cute. It's legalized cannibalism because you make little men and you get to eat them, which is, a lot of fun. And you can do so many different things with it. I think the spices are very evocative of our traditional food ways, and at Christmas time and most holiday meals tend to be conservative, so they tend to go back to foods that were very, very popular hundreds of years ago. Not so much for our normal eating patterns, but at Christmas, we're very nostalgic.
And now, moving on to another Christmas treat, our 12th night cake.
Yes, yes. This is actually one of my favorite cakes in the world, and this is what a fruit cake really wants to be. If you don't like fruit cake, it's because you haven't had a good one. This has a couple of different kinds of liqueur in it. You made this.
Yes, I did.
Yes, based on
It was a grueling process.
Well, it was based on a wonderful recipe that actually was in Martha Washington's cookbooks, the first lady of our country. This was one of her recipes, and she and George were married on 12th night, and it is thought that this was their wedding cake.
Oh, wow.
So it's very, very special, but of course, 12th night, Epiphany, the last day of the official Christmas season, is a day that you would celebrate and have something very, very special. So this is the cake from 12th night.
And it's a pretty dense cake.
It's very dense. It's got lots of dried fruits in it. It's got cognac. It's got marsala. It's got some spices. But it doesn't have any of those funny green cherries or any of the, none of the stuff that goes and gives fruitcakes such a bad name, a deservedly bad name. Not this one. This one is good. Dense, but buttery, and really a lovely, lovely cake.
So now decorating it. I know we have some marzipan already prepared.
We prepared marzipan, and what would happen, and I'm just going to kind of reach under here. It's heavy, and just flip over the marzipan. And it's been sitting here and getting just a little bit dry.
Now, what is marzipan for people who don't know?
Marzipan is a wonderful, wonderful combination of ground almonds, very, very finely ground almonds, with some sugar, and in modern versions, there's a little cornstarch thrown in to sweeten it up. And, you know, obviously, if you're making this in a full kitchen, you'll take a knife and clean it up, but you just drape it over. This one actually has rose water in it, which is an ingredient that was extremely popular in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, which was the heyday. The 12th night cakes traditionally were very, very elaborately decorated. They would have figures on them rendered out of marzipan or pastillage, which is another type of sugar work. They could have all sorts of designs and decorations. From the marzipan, I've bought these adorable little cutters, like so, which you can see it's got a holly leaf imprint. And I've just cut out from marzipan
the holly leaf.
The holly leaves. And, well,
and I see you've painted some already.
Of course I painted some already in your traditional colors. And you spread these around, and you end up with what is, and there's some little tiny ones too. Let's get this guy over here.
Now, before we run out of time, we have sofgonyot here as well.
These donuts. It is an Israeli dish, and it is something that really developed at the beginning of the 20th century as Jews from Eastern Europe were immigrating back to Palestine and before it became Israel. There are no traditional Hanukkah foods because Hanukkah is not one of the big holidays in the Jewish calendar. It's sort of a fourth among all the others.
I have my co-anchor here to come.
Excellent.
And
these,
Delicious. That's what you guys made here. I can't wait to try it.
Well, what would you like to try?
Everything? All of them? Do I have to choose?
No, definitely you don't have to choose.
I'll go for the sofgonyot.
Those are beautiful, and these are new. It's a jelly donut, deep fried.
Thank you.
And of course, the reason they're fried is because Hanukkah is the festival of lights, the miracle of the oil that lasted for 8 days.
I'm just gonna
go for it. Go for it. Oh, those look great.
I need to get into the jam.
Oh, you have to, because that's the sweetness.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. That's it for this month's edition of 219 West from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. Thank you for watching us. I'm Erica Butler.
I'm Dana Rappaport. We'll be back next month with more stories from the 5 boroughs. In the meantime, don't forget to check out our podcast on iTunes. From all of us in 219 West, happy holidays.